Okay friends, now we shall continue. We saw how Gandhiji was suggesting that wouldn't it be better if all matters of dispute between Hitler's Germany and Britain were referred to some international tribunal so that all issues and problems existing between these two nations could be solved in a peaceful manner without causing much harm or damage to anybody. And he also tries to remind Hitler of the fact that if at all Hitler is able to attain success in the war, if he manages to become successful and win the war, it would only be because his power of destruction was far greater than that of his opponents, and not because Hitler was perfectly right or justified in whatever he did. Okay, that means that Gandhiji is trying to prove the fact that war is never a kind of a solution to such problems. It can only lead to massive destruction, cause damage to entire humanity, and therefore it is the duty of every individual to work hard to ensure universal peace and harmony, and to safeguard the interests of humanity at large. That is why he continues by saying that an impartial tribunal will show as far as it is humanly possible which party was in the right. That is, if these disputes are taken to an impartial tribunal, we know that the court stands for impartiality and promotes the values of justice. So, when these disputes are taken to an impartial tribunal, an unbiased tribunal which stands for justice and peace, it would endeavor, as far as it is humanly possible, to prove which party was in the right. So, it will give out a verdict which will prove which side was right in the best possible manner, thereby avoiding any kind of conflict or damage, resolving issues in a manner that is acceptable to both sides. I hope it is clear. Let me continue. You know that not long ago I made an appeal to every Briton to accept my method of non-violent resistance. So, he again tries to draw the attention of Hitler to the fact that he had actually made an appeal, a formal appeal, a request to every Briton. Britain represents the natives of United Kingdom. And what was this request? This request was to accept the method of non-violent resistance that he had promoted. In fact, Gandhiji had actually made such an appeal before he had written this particular letter. Now, in that letter written earlier, in the same year, he had made an appeal to every Briton to not to resort to war and to maintain, to preserve, to protect good relations between nations and to end all hostilities, any feeling of animosity or enmity between nations. I'll probably give you a link to that letter after I finish this lesson, so that you can have a reading of that letter where he has made an appeal to every Britisher. Now let me continue. I did it because the British know me as a friend, though a rebel. So, Gandhiji clarifies that he made a formal appeal. He requested every Britisher to accept his method, his non-violent mode of resistance, under this belief that the British would always consider him as a friend, though they know that he has always been spearheading India's fight against the British for the cause of independence. So, he has this conviction, he expresses this conviction that he had made such a request to every Britisher, thinking that they consider him or they regard him as a friend of theirs, though they are aware of what he is up to, though they are aware of his activities, though they are aware of his aim of attaining independence for India. Continuing from the text, I am a stranger to you and your people. I have not the courage to make you the appeal I made to every Briton. Not that it would not apply to you with the same force as to the British, but my present proposal is much simple because much more practical and familiar. So again, he elaborates upon the same point and he says that the Britishers know me. They are aware of my activities and therefore I could make an address to them. Therefore I could make an open request to every Britisher. But with regard to you and your people, I am perhaps a stranger and I don't seem to have the courage to make such an appeal to your people as I had made to every Briton. Not that it would not apply to you with the same force as to the British, but my present proposal is much simple because much more practical and familiar. So he says that there is a certain kind of a perhaps something that prevents him from making such an appeal that he had made to every Briton, because he feels that he is still a stranger to Hitler and to Germany as a whole. That doesn't mean that his appeal or request is not applicable to Germany. It is applicable to Germany in the same way as it had been applicable to the British. And he also declares that his present proposal is much simple because it is more practical and familiar. So again, he is trying to reaffirm his belief, his strong conviction in non-violent strategies of resistance. He feels that it is much simpler and familiar as well as practical. So, the main point that he has put forward here is that though he feels a bit though he feels that it is not probably as easy as making a request to every Briton when it comes to Nazi Germany, when it comes to Hitler. It doesn't mean that his request or appeal for universal harmony, for good relations between nations, doesn't apply to Hitler and Germany. It indeed applies to Germany as much as it had applied to the British, with the same force with which it had applied to the British. Now, I am proceeding. During this season, when the hearts of the peoples of Europe yearn for peace, we have suspended even our own peaceful struggle. Is it too much to ask you to make an effort for peace during a time which may mean nothing to you personally, but which must mean much to the millions of Europeans whose dumb cry for peace I hear, for my ears are attended to, hearing the dumb millions? So he says that the present situation is asking for peace. Number of people in Europe yearn for peace and harmony, and talking about our own situation, that is, he's talking about the condition in his own country. We have suspended even our own peaceful struggle. So, because of this disturbance happening, even our own peaceful struggle for the attainment of independence has been affected. And he's asking a question next. Is it too much to ask you to make an effort for peace during a time which may mean nothing to you personally, but which must mean much to the millions of Europeans whose dumb cry for peace I hear, for my ears are attended to hearing the dumb millions? So he says that, is it too much? Am I making too big a request to you during a time which may be nothing to Hitler, but which means a lot to millions of Europeans who are silently crying for peace, and I cannot remain insensitive to such cries coming from dumb millions, because I am used to hearing such cries. And I had intended to address a joint appeal to you and Signor Mussolini, whom I had the privilege of meeting when I was in Rome during my visit to England as a delegate to the Round Table Conference. I hope that he will take this as addressed to him also, with the necessary changes. So he says that his actual intention was to draft a joint appeal to you, that is to Hitler as well as to Signor Mussolini. Signor is a form of address for an Italian man, and I hope all of you have heard about Benito Mussolini, who was the leader of the National Fascist Party and who was the Prime Minister of Italy for a while. He was also the founder of Italian fascism, and he just like Hitler promoted the values of nationalism and the expansion of Italian territories, trying to assert the superiority of Italian past and heritage, and trying to inculcate a certain respect for the Italian tradition and a sense of shared past among Italian people, much like what Hitler did, that is trying to instill that feeling of nationalistic, fierce nationalistic pride and respect for tradition. So his name is always associated with fascism. So that is why Gandhiji feels that the appeal that he is now making to Hitler is equally applicable to Benito Mussolini as well. And he says, he recalls that he had the privilege of meeting Mussolini when he was in Rome during his visit to England as a delegate to the Round Table Conference. Hope all of you know about the Round Table Conference, which Round Table Conferences were a series of conferences organized by the British government to actually discuss constitutional reforms. And these conferences were held during the period from 1930 to 1932, and Gandhiji had attended the second Round Table Conference in 1931. So he's talking about that particular Round Table Conference.